Hey everyone, welcome back to Retro Reel Recaps. Today, we're talking about the movie Spy. It's an outrageously hilarious story of a desk-bound CIA agent who must go deep undercover to stop a global crisis. The story starts at a big party in a mansion in Varna, Bulgaria. We meet Bradley Fine. He is a CIA field agent. He is walking through the mansion looking for someone. He sees a bodyguard. To distract him, Bradley throws his glass. This lets him go through a door without being seen. The door leads to a tunnel underground. Bradley takes out his gun and looks around. He finds a room with a man on the phone. Bradley tells the man to hang up. This man is Rayna Boyanov. He is a very famous and dangerous arms dealer. He recognizes Bradley's voice and smiles. He turns around. Bradley points his gun at him. He tells Rayna to say where the bomb is. He says he will shoot him if he does not tell in 10 seconds. Rayna smiles and says that when he hid the bomb, he killed everyone else. So only he knows where it is. Before Bradley can think, he suddenly sneezes. The gun goes off by accident. The bullet hits Rayna in the head, and he dies right there. Bradley cannot believe what he just did. At the same time, we meet Susan Cooper. She is 40 years old and a CIA analyst. She is Bradley's helper, talking to him through an earpiece. She asks Bradley what happened. He says he sneezed and shot Rayna by accident. He says it is dusty in the tunnel, and he forgot to take his allergy pill. Susan really likes Bradley. She tells him not to worry because she forgot to remind him to take the pill. Suddenly, Susan sees 3 of Rayna's bodyguards on her screen. She warns Bradley. He quickly leaves the room. The bodyguards shoot at him but miss. As he runs, Susan tells him another person is ahead. Bradley kills that person. Susan keeps giving him directions, and Bradley keeps fighting the bad guys. He finally gets out of the tunnel and reaches the top. We also see that the CIA office is in very bad condition. Bats are coming out from the ceiling, but Susan cannot get distracted because she has to help Bradley get away. She tells Bradley to open a door at the exact right time. He does it, and the door hits a man who is coming. Bradley tries to escape in a car but sees there are many enemies. Susan guides him to go to the docks. The bodyguards shoot at him a lot. He gets to a yacht but there are no keys. As the bodyguards come close, Susan calls for a drone to strike the docks. This lets Bradley start the yacht without keys and he escapes. As he drives away, he thanks Susan but then he awkwardly tells Susan to do some chores for him. We can see that Susan is secretly in love with Bradley and agrees to whatever he says. Bradley only thinks of Susan as a friend and coworker. Later we see Susan cutting the grass at Bradley's house. But she looks unhappy. Next, Bradley invites Susan to a very fancy restaurant for dinner. Susan is not used to places like this. She starts chewing a hand towel. She says it is very chewy. Bradley tells her that it is a hand towel and not food. Susan is very embarrassed. While they eat, Bradley gives Susan a small box. Susan thinks it might be a ring, but it is actually a necklace with a small cupcake on it. Bradley says he is giving it to her because she loves cupcakes. Susan accepts it but she is not happy. Bradley tells her to put it on. She does. Then Bradley says that they are a good team. This makes Susan sad because it shows Bradley only thinks of her as a friend and teammate. Next we see the CIA headquarters in Virginia. We meet Elaine Crocker, the CIA boss. She talks to Bradley. She says someone else must know where the dangerous weapon is. Susan speaks up. She says Rayna Boyanov, Rayna's daughter, must know. He trusted her the most. Elaine says Susan has a pink eye. Susan says it is just an allergy. Elaine then shows a picture of Rayna Boyanov on a screen. She gives details about where Rayna is and says she is talking to other terrorist leaders. Then she shows a photo of a man named Solsa Dudayev, who is also a terrorist. She gives Bradley his mission. He has to find Rayna and get the nuclear bomb. As Susan and Bradley walk out of the chief's office, Susan tells Bradley she feels uneasy. She says the information on Rayna's location is too easy to get. She says all her alarm bells are ringing, but Bradley tells her to stay calm and focus on the mission. As he leaves in the elevator, he tells Susan how much he admires her. Next, we see Susan having lunch with her friend Nancy. Nancy is also a CIA analyst. Susan tells Nancy that she left her teaching job to become an agent, but her life is still boring. She says Bradley will never love her. Nancy cheers her up and comforts her by saying Susan is wonderful. But Susan is still sad. The next night, Bradley goes on the mission to find Rayna. Susan guides him from the control room, but Susan is suspicious. The heat sensors are not working right, and she cannot see anyone inside the house. There is also some interference, so Bradley's camera signal is bad. Susan tells Bradley to stop the mission, but Bradley goes inside anyway. Susan cannot see anyone, but Bradley knocks out 3 of Rayna's bodyguards. As Bradley brags about doing this without Susan's help, Rayna suddenly appears. She puts a gun to Bradley's head and takes his gun. Susan cannot believe what is happening. Rayna looks into Bradley's camera. She tells Susan that she knows Bradley Fine and all the other active CIA agents. Rayna warns Susan that if the CIA does not stay away from her, more people will die. She then looks into the camera and shoots Bradley. Susan is helpless. She just watches from her office with tears in her eyes because she cannot do anything. The next morning, Elaine gathers all the CIA members. They have a ceremony to remember Bradley and pay tribute to him. Nancy comforts Susan. She says there was nothing Susan could have done to stop it. Susan cries while looking at the cupcake locket Bradley gave her, but Susan is not ready to accept that Bradley is dead. She goes back to her office and watches the video from his mission again. Elaine comes in and tells Susan to make some changes to Bradley's death report. Susan says she will do it right away, but when she looks at the screen, she notices she paused the video on a piece of paper with some writing. She immediately sends the image to Nancy to make it clearer. When Nancy makes the image better, they see a telephone number with a code for Paris, France. Next, we see another active CIA agent, Rick Ford. Rick is annoyed. He complains to Elaine and asks how Rayna got all the information on the active CIA agents. Elaine has called a meeting with all the agents. She says Rayna has hacked their whole system. She is almost ready to sell the dangerous bomb to a terrorist group. Elaine then says they still do not know where the bomb is. She tells everyone that from the video, Susan found a phone number. That number belongs to Sergio De Luca, who works with the terrorist group. Their information says Rayna is talking to De Luca to find the highest bidder for the bomb. Elaine tells the agents they must track De Luca and Rayna, but there is a problem. All their agents' information has been leaked, so they need someone who is not an active CIA agent to do this job. At that moment, Susan steps forward. She says she is ready for the task and she wants to do it for Bradley. Rick disagrees with this idea, but Elaine likes it. Susan insists that even though Rayna knows who worked with Bradley, she would not know Susan by her face. So Susan is the right choice for the mission. When Elaine finally decides to send Susan, Rick storms out of the room. He thinks Susan is not good enough, and he is unhappy with Elaine's decision. Elaine interviews Susan for the mission. She tells Susan that her job is only to track and report. She must not make contact with De Luca or Rayna at any cost. Susan is given a fake identity as a mother of 4 named Carol Jerkins. Elaine tells Susan she will get an office across from De Luca's office in Paris to trace his calls and communications. Elaine warns Susan that one mistake will put a dangerous weapon in the hands of terrorists. She then tells Susan to go see Patrick, who will give her the gadgets for the mission. Susan comes out of the office and stops by the wall. She whispers to herself, "What am I doing?" Next, Susan and Nancy go to collect the gadgets. They are excited as they enter the gadgets room. Susan is happy she will be a field agent now. They meet Patrick. They see guns on his table and get excited. But Patrick tells Susan the guns are not for her. Instead, he gives her a whistle that can fire darts. He gives her pepper spray that looks like anti-fungal spray. He gives chloroform wipes that look like hemorrhoid wipes. He gives anti-venom tablets that look like stool softener tablets. And he gives a night vision scope hidden in a wristwatch. Susan is annoyed, because all these things are hidden in awkward ways. Patrick then gives her bags and tells her to get ready to go on the mission as Carol Jerkins. Patrick says it is best if she sacrifices her life for her country. But Susan replies that she is not sacrificing herself, she plans to come back. Patrick sarcastically says, "Let's see." Susan flies to Paris, disguised with a new look. The taxi drives her to her hotel. She is excited to see the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre Museum. They drive through a nice area of Paris, and Susan thinks her hotel will be there. But soon the taxi enters a remote area and stops near a hotel. At first, Susan does not believe this is her hotel, Hotel Modière. She only believes it when she sees the name, and she is disgusted. She checks in and goes to her room, but the place feels wrong. She quickly finds her spy things and contacts Nancy, who will be her handler. Nancy tells her their control room is now free of bats but has a lot of mice. Susan panics, but Nancy calms her down. Susan goes to the restroom and washes her face. As she sits on her bed, she hears a voice in her room. Susan quickly throws her belt at the sound, but it is Rick. Rick tells Susan he is the real agent, which is why he sneaked into her room without her noticing. Rick brags about all the things he has done and exaggerates his accomplishments. Before leaving, Rick tells Susan she will ruin the mission. Susan insists that Rick is the one who will ruin it. The next morning, Susan goes to see De Luca's office building. When she gets there, she sees it has been set on fire. She asks a person nearby for details. The man tells her the building was set on fire last night by someone. Then he shows her a photo of the building on fire. Susan notices there is a suspect in the picture. Nancy, who is handling Susan, gets the photo and starts scanning it to find out who the person is. While Nancy does this, Susan goes to a nearby restaurant to get a meal. As she gets ready to order, Rick shows up again. He was already sitting there. He again tells Susan this mission is too hard for her. But Nancy tells Rick to stay out of the mission. As Rick leaves, Susan spots the same man who was there when De Luca's office was set on fire. Susan immediately tells Nancy she will follow that man and starts following him. But that man is actually following Rick. Rick sits at another restaurant, where a young woman starts talking to him. Meanwhile, the man following Rick switches backpacks with him without Rick noticing. This happened in front of the young woman, which means she is also involved. Rick then picks up the new backpack and starts walking. Susan tells Nancy she must warn Rick, and starts running toward him. But the young woman sees Susan running after Rick and uses her cell phone to tell her handler that Rick has a friend. Susan shouts at Rick, but he does not listen. He goes into a crowd where a concert is being held. In a funny moment, Susan tries to take the microphone from the singer to warn Rick, but the singer does not let her. After a struggle, Susan manages to grab the mic. Holding the microphone on stage, she tells Rick about the swapped backpacks. Rick looks inside the bag and finds a bomb. He throws the bag into a lake behind the concert. This causes a big explosion. The people at the concert start running away in panic. At that moment, the same man who swapped the backpacks takes a photo of Susan. Susan runs after the man. She stays in contact with Nancy and tells her friend she is chasing him because he will reveal her identity. Nancy tries to stop Susan, but she keeps running after the suspect. The man runs into an old empty building. Susan takes out her gun and follows him. She climbs the stairs and looks for the man, but he is gone. Suddenly, the man bursts out from a door and knocks Susan down. The man takes out his knife, but Susan points her pistol at him. The man stays calm. He tells Susan that a gun needs bullets to fire, and that CIA training has gotten worse. Susan realizes the magazine for her pistol is on the floor, but Susan does not give up. She kicks the man in the stomach. This accidentally makes the man stab himself with his own knife. Susan then grabs the knife and pushes the man. Again by accident, he falls from the balcony and dies. Susan cannot believe she just killed a man. Susan vomits. She unintentionally drops the knife, and it sticks into the man's body. Seeing this, Susan passes out. Next, we see Susan in her hotel room. She has taken the man's camera, and is looking at the pictures and videos on it. Elaine and Nancy are talking to Susan from the control room. From a video on the camera, they get a lead on DeLuca. They see the young woman who was with Rick in Paris and they hear a code word, Ronaldo. They look at pictures from the Boyanov case and find out that Ronaldo is the license plate number of Boyanov's car. Using GPS tracking, they find the vehicle in Rome, Italy. Now they know that DeLuca and Rayna must be in Rome. Elaine orders Susan to come back, but Susan assures her that she can do this task. Elaine thinks for a moment, and then gives Susan a new cover name, Penny Morgan. Her new identity is a divorced housewife who loves cats. With her new identity, Susan goes to Rome. Nancy is her handler from the control room. Outside the airport, a car arrives to pick her up. It is driven by another agent from Italy named Aldo. Aldo is a strange and funny character. He welcomes Susan and tries to kiss her, but Susan pushes him away. He then spanks Susan, which annoys her. Aldo tells Susan to get in the car. When she gets in, Aldo drives so fast that it scares Susan. The whole time, Aldo keeps hitting on Susan, but she stays focused on the mission. Aldo drops Susan near a casino where DeLuca is about to arrive. Then Aldo starts hitting on another lady near his car. Susan asks Aldo for a pistol, but Aldo tells her he was instructed that she would not need a gun. After that, Aldo drives away. Soon after, Susan sees DeLuca arriving in the car with the license plate Ronaldo. Susan tells Nancy she will go inside the casino to track DeLuca, but Nancy stops her. Nancy tells Susan her cat lady outfit is not right for that casino. Susan decides to get a new look and go inside the casino at night. Susan puts on a beautiful black dress and changes her appearance to look like she belongs in the casino. Nancy tries to stop her, but Susan turns off her connection with Nancy. As Susan enters the casino, the receptionist checks her name. He tells Susan that her name, Penny Morgan, is not on the list. Just at that moment, Rick appears. He tells the receptionist that Susan is with him. Susan is surprised to see Rick there, but she has no choice and must go with him. Rick praises Susan's dress. The receptionist compliments Rick by calling him a gentleman. As soon as Rick and Susan are alone, Rick angrily asks her what she is doing there. Susan asks him the same question. In a funny moment, they start arguing like little kids, and neither one will back down. After a heated discussion, Susan tells Rick to stay away from her. She then leaves to search for DeLuca. She spots DeLuca going to a poker table. Susan follows him and tries to sit in an empty chair, but she is told all the seats are reserved. The receptionist comes and takes her out of the poker room. As she is leaving, Susan notices DeLuca writing a note. Outside the room, she sees a man take DeLuca's note to a lady. Susan sees that it is Rayna, right there in the casino. Susan quickly contacts Nancy and tells her she has found Rayna, but at that moment, Susan sees someone put something in Rayna's drink. A waiter then takes the drink to Rayna. Susan thinks quickly. She decides to tell Rayna because Rayna might be the only person who knows where the bomb is. Just as Rayna is about to drink, Susan interrupts. She tells Rayna someone put a drug in her drink and then left. Rayna is surprised but suspicious of Susan. Still, Rayna tells one of her men to go check for the person who touched her drink. Rayna then talks to Susan and asks her name. Susan says she is Penny Morgan. Soon a person comes and whispers in Rayna's ear. Rayna tells Susan they have caught the culprit. She then tells Susan to come with her to identify the person. As Rayna stands up, all her bodyguards stand up too, which frightens Susan, but she goes with Rayna to the back of the casino. Rayna asks the man if he poisoned her drink. The man says no. Rayna makes him drink it. At first he says he does not want to drink, but then Rayna whispers something in his ear. The man reluctantly drinks it. After he drinks, he curses at Rayna and then dies. Susan cannot handle this and passes out instantly. She wakes up a minute later. Rayna then asks Susan if she will tell anyone what happened there. Susan can see Rayna's bodyguards pointing their guns at her head, reflected in Rayna's necklace. Susan tells Rayna that the man got what he deserved. Rayna's expression changes and her bodyguards lower their weapons. Rayna then invites Susan to join her for dinner. At the dinner table, the waiter brings an appetizer. Susan remembers her dinner with Bradley, and thinks it is a hand towel because it looks similar. But to her surprise, she realizes it is food when Rayna eats it. The waiter asks for their order, and Rayna tells Susan to order. Susan acts awkwardly because she is not used to fancy restaurants in Rome. Rayna does not get suspicious. She just thinks Susan is a normal woman who is not familiar with expensive places. Susan admits she is not used to such places. She lies and says she came to Rome after saving money for years. Hearing this, Rayna opens up. She tells Susan she knew someone just like her. Rayna then tells Susan she is going to Budapest in her private jet. Susan can come with her, and then go anywhere she wants on Rayna's jet. Rayna says this is her way of repaying Susan for saving her life. As they are about to leave, Rayna spots Rick. Rayna knows all the active CIA agents. She immediately signals her men to grab Rick. 2 of Rayna's men hold him just then. Susan, who is in contact with Nancy, sends a secret code to shut down the power. Nancy quickly shuts off the power for that part of Rome. Everything becomes dark. Using this advantage, Rick knocks out the men holding him. As another person tries to grab Rick, Susan sees him using her night vision watch and knocks him out. Then Susan pushes Rayna and throws her to the floor. Just then the electricity comes back on. Susan pretends she does not know what just happened. Meanwhile, Susan and Rick exchange a look. Susan mutters that she has it under control as Rick quickly leaves. Rayna gets up, trying to understand what just happened. She and Susan then go to the airport. They fly in Rayna's private jet. Susan says she likes the jet and tells Rayna it is her first time on a private plane. Rayna tells Susan that Susan reminds her of her mother. Rayna shows a picture of her mother to Susan. Her mother looks different from Susan, but Susan has no choice. She says Rayna's mother looked exactly like her. Rayna offers Susan a drink. The drink makes Susan feel dizzy. Susan thinks she has been poisoned. She quickly tries to get her anti-venom tablets that look like stool softeners. But before she can take them, she passes out. After some time, Susan wakes up. She yells at Rayna for putting drugs in her drink. Rayna replies that she cannot trust anyone, so she had to test Susan. As Susan processes this, one of Rayna's bodyguards shoots another guard. He points his gun at Rayna. Rayna shouts, "Colin, what are you doing?" The man says his name is Frederick, not Colin, and he is there to kill Rayna. Rayna says she can make him rich, but she forgets his name again. This annoys Frederick. The pilots try to stop Frederick, but he shoots them both. Susan quickly throws her hemorrhoid wipes at Frederick. Susan and Frederick then fight, and Rayna watches in surprise. Susan manages to take Frederick's gun away, but Frederick pushes her. Susan then fires a dart at Frederick using her special whistle. The dart kills him, but suddenly the jet starts to go down. Susan quickly goes to the cockpit and tries to control the plane. As Susan gets the jet under control, the 2 dead men fall onto Rayna. Rayna moans. Susan enjoys this and makes the plane dip again so the bodies fall on Rayna once more. Rayna moans again. Then Susan starts flying the jet normally. But suddenly, Rayna points a gun at Susan's head. She says Susan has just blown her cover. Susan thinks quickly. She puts the jet on autopilot and tries to calm Rayna down. Susan tells Rayna her name is Amber Valentine. She says Rayna's father hired her as a secret bodyguard to protect Rayna. Rayna cannot believe it, but Susan stays firm. She yells at Rayna, saying her appearance and the name Penny Morgan were chosen by her father to protect Rayna. Secretly, Susan shouts that she never looked like Rayna's mom, and that Rayna would be dead without her help. Rayna is still confused. But Susan turns off the autopilot, and tells Rayna to land the plane herself if she does not believe her. Rayna has no choice but to believe Susan. She tells Susan to fly to Budapest. She warns Susan she will kill her if any of this is a lie. After that, Susan and Rayna reach Budapest. Susan asks Rayna who she is meeting. Rayna says she is meeting a potential bidder. Suddenly, a suspicious man approaches Rayna. Susan quickly throws her cell phone at the man and knocks him down. But Rayna shouts at Susan that this man is Anton, part of her security team. Susan tries to act assertive. She tells Rayna she does not like Anton, so she hit him. Rayna then tells Anton that Susan is her private bodyguard. After that, they go to their rooms in the Budapest hotel. Susan enters her room and tries to calm down. She tries to contact Nancy but quickly sees hidden cameras in the room. She leaves the hotel to talk to Nancy outside. As Susan goes outside, she is shocked to see Nancy there. Nancy says she was sent to find Susan using the signal from Susan's earpiece. Suddenly Rayna appears with Anton. Rayna asks about Nancy. Susan has to lie and say Nancy is her assistant. Suddenly a car appears, and a person inside shoots at Rayna. Susan jumps on Rayna to save her, but Anton is shot and dies on the spot. The car drives away. Susan shouts at Nancy to protect Rayna. She steals a scooter to chase the car. In a funny moment, the scooter falls over. Susan quickly grabs another bike and starts chasing the car that attacked Rayna. Susan tries to take a shortcut but gets her bike stuck in the mud. After she gets it out, she starts chasing the car again. Soon the car crashes. Susan reaches the crash site. She looks inside the car and finds another CIA spy, Karen Walker. Susan asks Karen why she is there, but Karen tries to shoot Susan. Before Karen can shoot, someone kills her and the driver. Susan looks around but cannot find who did it. Susan realizes Karen was the traitor who sold the names of the CIA agents to Rayna. Susan rushes back to find Rayna and Nancy. When she finds Nancy, Susan yells at her, asking where Rayna is. As Nancy starts to explain, someone throws water on them from above. They look up and see Rayna there. Rayna shouts at them to come up to her room. In the elevator, Susan and Nancy think Rayna heard their conversation, but when they get to the room, Rayna shouts at them for being lazy and lousy. This makes Nancy and Susan feel relieved. Rayna tells Susan to change her clothes and improve her look. She also tells Susan to get someone better than Nancy because Nancy is too lousy and unfit. Susan appears in a new look. Nancy tells Susan her new dress is very expensive, but Susan does not care. Nancy also says Aldo will be her replacement. Susan is not happy to see Aldo again, but she has no choice. Then Susan goes to a party with Rayna. Aldo is also there as a bodyguard for Rayna. Nancy is outside keeping an eye on suspects. Rayna shows Susan a picture of a young woman. She says this woman is coming to make a bid. Susan immediately recognizes her. She is the same woman who distracted Rick in Paris. Susan steps aside to tell Nancy to keep an eye on this woman. But suddenly, Susan spots Rick in the crowd, dancing. Susan quickly goes to Rick and pushes the girl he is dancing with. Susan and Rick then start to quarrel. In a funny moment they pretend to dance, but they are actually fighting. Meanwhile, Susan sees the young woman has arrived to meet with Rayna. Susan quickly tells Rick to take out the bodyguards while she goes after the young woman. After Susan insists, Rick agrees. Susan tells Nancy to come inside and create a distraction so she can stop the young woman. Nancy goes on stage and tries to kiss the singer, which creates a distraction. Everyone in the crowd looks at them. Susan grabs the young woman at gunpoint, and Rick takes care of her associates. But Rick shows up again and distracts Susan. The young woman grabs Susan, and Susan drops her gun. Nancy sees this and creates another distraction. But in the confusion, the young woman escapes. Susan runs after the young woman, but she is unarmed. The young woman hides in a kitchen next to the street. Susan goes after her. Suddenly, the young woman appears and attacks Susan with a knife. Susan fights back with whatever she can find, like pans and dishes. She manages to hit the young woman with a pan several times. Finally, Susan overpowers her. She tells the young woman she is under arrest by Susan Cooper, CIA. But right at that moment, someone throws a knife that kills the young woman. Susan looks back and sees Rayna there. Surprised, Susan asks how she did that. Rayna calmly replies that she did not do it. In a twist, Bradley appears next to Rayna. Before Susan can understand what is happening, two of Rayna's associates knock her out. When Susan wakes up, she sees Bradley and Rayna in front of her. Rayna throws water on her. Rayna tells Susan that she snores loudly, and it is gross. Bradley tells Susan she should have stayed in the CIA office. Susan calls Bradley a traitor. Rayna tells Susan that she and Bradley are in love. They kiss in front of Susan. Susan, who had feelings for Bradley, gets jealous. She tells Rayna she is a loud kisser, and it is gross. Rayna calls Susan pathetic. But Susan asks Rayna how it feels to be in love and sleep with the man who killed her father. Hearing this, Bradley and Rayna tell Susan they plan to kill Boyanov together. Rayna, now fed up with Susan, puts a gun to Susan's head. Bradley tries to stop her, but Rayna pulls the trigger. The gun is empty and has no bullets. Rayna tells Susan she will not waste a bullet on her, and they leave. Susan is taken to a cell while handcuffed. She sees Aldo is already in prison there. Aldo welcomes her. Susan tells Aldo she failed the mission. Aldo then tells a story that starts seriously but ends in a funny way, which makes Susan even more frustrated. After some time, Bradley walks in. He wakes up Susan and tells her the whole truth. Bradley says he is not a traitor or a double agent. He says he had to fake his death to win Rayna's trust. Susan asks Bradley how she can trust him. Bradley tells her he is the one who shot Karen Walker when she tried to kill Susan. Susan is now convinced. She hits Bradley with her head. Bradley says it hurts, and Susan replies that she meant it to hurt. Bradley tells Susan that Rayna did not know her real identity as a spy until Susan said it in the kitchen. Bradley informs Susan he is now going to meet DeLuca and Salsa Dudayev. They are coming to meet Rayna, and that is how Bradley will find out where the bomb is. As Bradley leaves, Aldo tells Susan she is a good agent, and that Bradley underestimated her. Hearing this, Susan tells Aldo to untie her. Aldo is reluctant at first but agrees. However, he keeps touching Susan's buttocks while trying to untie her. Finally, he unties her using his mouth. Susan then unties Aldo, and they both move out. Outside, Susan quickly creates a distraction and knocks out the two guards watching them. They take the guards' pistols. Susan tells Aldo to alert the CIA and Interpol. She then tells Aldo she knows the location of DeLuca's villa where Bradley and Rayna have gone, and she is going there. Hearing this, Aldo sighs and says, "One day I will make love to Susan, the super spy." Susan then comes out of the building and spots a car. As she breaks the car window, she sees another car, a BMW. She quickly decides to take the BMW to go after Rayna and Bradley. At DeLuca's villa, Susan creates a distraction with the BMW by crashing it into a tree. DeLuca's associates search the car and find no one inside. Susan uses this chance to break into DeLuca's villa from the back door. As Rayna and Bradley arrive at the villa, DeLuca welcomes them. He informs Rayna that Dudayev will be there any moment. Suddenly, DeLuca becomes serious. He tells Rayna he does not approve of Bradley. Bradley tells DeLuca he worked for the CIA before, but is now with Rayna. DeLuca is not satisfied with this explanation. He tells his men to shoot Bradley even though Rayna tells him not to. Just as they are about to shoot Bradley, Susan shows up and points her gun at DeLuca. She introduces herself with her real identity as a CIA agent. She uses her knowledge as a CIA analyst to convince DeLuca that she and Bradley are more useful to him alive. Because Dudayev cannot be trusted, Susan admits she is in love with Bradley even though Bradley never knew. Rayna looks at Susan arrogantly, but DeLuca is convinced. He tells his men to lower their guns, but DeLuca warns Susan that if she is lying, he will kill both her and Bradley. Soon Dudayev arrives. DeLuca greets him. Dudayev asks for the package. DeLuca tells him that Rayna will only say where it is after she sees the payment. Dudayev shows a box with diamonds worth 100 million euros. DeLuca checks the diamonds and tells Rayna to go ahead. Rayna takes everyone inside the villa where the car with the license plate Ronaldo is parked. Dudayev asks Rayna why they are there. Rayna says the dangerous weapon is in the trunk of the car. She opens the trunk and shows a metal box. Rayna says the metal is to hide any radiation from the weapon. Dudayev's men check the weapon, but suddenly DeLuca points his gun at Dudayev. Luca's men kill all of Dudayev's men, and DeLuca shoots Dudayev in the head. Susan tries to take out her gun, but DeLuca's men take it from her. Rayna cannot believe what is happening. Susan tells Rayna that DeLuca has tricked her. DeLuca's men then take the bomb and the diamonds. DeLuca tells Rayna he has a buyer who will pay 500 million euros for the bomb, and that he will use it in New York City. Rayna asks DeLuca if he will kill her too. DeLuca says he has no time to explain. As DeLuca is about to shoot Rayna, Rick shows up. But in a funny moment, his coat gets stuck in the door. This knocks Rick out and he drops his gun. DeLuca gets ready to shoot Rayna again, but Susan sees Rick's gun, quickly picks it up and pushes Rayna out of the way, saving her from the shot. Susan fights back, injuring DeLuca and killing his men. Bradley is amazed by Susan's fighting skills. Susan shouts, asking where DeLuca is. DeLuca appears from behind a pillar and shoots at Susan, but Bradley jumps in front of her, saving her. The bullet hits Bradley's shoulder. Meanwhile, Susan takes DeLuca's gun away, but DeLuca overpowers Susan and tries to choke her. Susan tells Rayna to throw her a gun. Rayna is too afraid at first. She finally pushes a gun towards Susan, but it is empty. DeLuca laughs, but Susan hits him in the head with the gun. DeLuca runs to a helicopter to escape. Meanwhile, Rick wakes up. Susan, Rayna, Rick, and Bradley all follow DeLuca. DeLuca quickly gets on the helicopter and tells his men to kill the others. Susan kills DeLuca's men, but DeLuca starts to fly away in the helicopter. Susan jumps and grabs onto the helicopter. Rick appears out of nowhere and grabs Susan's legs. They are both hanging from the helicopter in the air. Rick tries to climb up, but after a while he slips. He curses at Susan as he falls into the water below. Susan manages to climb up and open the helicopter's door while it is still in the air. She fights with DeLuca and hurts his injury, but DeLuca takes out his gun and aims it at Susan. Just then, Susan throws the nuclear bomb and the diamonds out of the helicopter. DeLuca is devastated as he is about to shoot Susan. He is shot himself. Nancy appears in another helicopter. She is happy because she just killed a villain. Nancy is in a helicopter flown by Aldo. Susan quickly takes control of the helicopter. Aldo tries to flirt with her, but Susan tells him not now. Suddenly DeLuca wakes up and grabs Susan by her cupcake locket. DeLuca tells Susan, "It is a very bad necklace." Susan tells him, "It's all yours," and unclips it. This makes DeLuca fall out of the helicopter. Susan manages to land the helicopter safely. The CIA team recovers the weapon. The CIA arrests Rayna. Rayna and Susan have a short conversation before the CIA takes her away. Aldo appears and tells Susan that his real name is Albert, and he works for MI6. Just as Susan is about to believe him, he tries to kiss her again. Susan pushes him away. Elaine and Bradley arrive. Elaine tells Susan she is promoted to field agent. She will go to Prague tomorrow for another mission. She is given a new identity, Frances Mays. Susan does not like the name at all, but Elaine and Bradley laugh and tell her she must use it. Elaine leaves. Bradley asks Susan out for dinner, but after thinking for a moment, Susan says no. She tells him, "Bradley, I admire you." Bradley respects her choice. Rick appears and tells Susan she did a good job, but he says it was just beginner's luck. Rick then gets on a yacht and tells Susan and Nancy he is going to Italy or Greece. Susan and Nancy are confused because the yacht is on a lake, and you cannot sail to Italy or Greece from a lake. But Rick, being as silly as ever, sails away. In the last scene, we see a funny situation. Susan wakes up in the morning. When she is awake, she realizes that she slept with Rick the night before. Susan screams, but Rick puts his arm around her. And that's the end of the story. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.